hatte Herr, dass dein Knecht dich geleite.
Welcome to Mr. Opera. And today, I guess I'm gonna get. Let's turn down this stuff over here. Let's turn down this background music. I'm fixing to get myself, I guess, into some trouble today. I guess I'm going after all the powerful ones. But anyway, I thought we'd do a little bit of bullshit inspecting. A little bit of bullshit inspecting, but I guess I want to talk about one of the biggest topics in all of classical singing, and maybe in all of singing. And it has to do with the low larynx. What does it mean to lower your larynx? What is up with all of this talk about healthy laryngeal elevation and unhealthy raising and lowering of the larynx, and like what's the difference? What's up with this extrinsic laryngeal muscles concept, which is the idea? Well, I guess that's not what that idea is, but there's an idea that your larynx, which Lucas is going to explain to us what that is, but there's an idea that it has to be relaxed because relaxation means healthy, or something like that. No one ever actually explains to us what about a relaxed larynx is more healthy. There's no studies explaining what exactly we're trying to avoid as far as like any kind of trauma, et cetera, et cetera. But so without further ado, let's maybe watch a little bit of this, and or let's watch the whole thing, and then let's see if my bullshit inspector theme song works.
Let's talk about your larynx. The larynx is the house where your vocal cords live. One of the most common issues for singers is the manipulation or the raising of the larynx. When you raise your larynx, you feel a lift below the back sides of your tongue, as though you're about to gargle water. It actually mimics the sensation of gagging or vomiting. And you end up sounding like this. As a young singer, relaxing my larynx was my biggest hurdle. So what did I do to counteract it? Sing, stop, relax. Remember, sing where you speak. Your speaking voice should be the most uninhibited, natural sound you can make.
Yeah. Okay, now let's give this the full bullshit inspector treatment. Let's start from the beginning, and let's see what we can say about this video. Is it total bullshit, or is there some true stuff in here? Is there really a tip? I don't know that there was really a technical tip in there. It was like, take a break and try again kind of thing. So we don't have to worry too much about that, but there's some stuff really built in to this video that's bullshit that goes beyond what actually gets said in the video, I think, and I want to be sure to cover that. So I think, yeah. So we got to reset our bullshit counter here. Okay. So let's start from the beginning.
Let's talk about your larynx. The larynx is the house where your vocal cords live. One of the most common issues for
That's
singers
true.
is the manipulation or the raising. The larynx is the house where your vocal cords live. One of the most common issues for singers is the manipulation or the raising of the larynx. When you raise your larynx, you feel a little.
I gotta put that untrue, but it's bordering on bullshit. Okay, untrue on a couple levels. Untrue on the level that raising your larynx is manipulation. So the thing is that your larynx is able to go up and go down, and which one of those is the manipulation? It's just kind of arbitrary. He's saying up is manipulated, and then, I don't know, maybe not up is not manipulated. But it seems to me if the natural tendency was for your larynx to go up, then what's manipulated is actually what you're trying to do, which is not raise it and still raise the pitch. Raising your larynx shortens the vocal tract. So it's one of the primary ways that you raise all the resonances of your vocal tract, which means if you want to not raise your larynx and then still do a bunch of stuff that you were just doing by raising your larynx, you're probably going to have to find some alternative strategy, not just to replace what you're doing physically, but what you're doing acoustically. So it's really not as simple as what he's telling us here. Not to mention, he seems to be literally manipulating now, because manipulating means using your hand to move something. When we talk about manipulating in a pejorative sense, I guess there's a sense of like you're touching something you shouldn't. You're not leaving something alone that's going to be way better off if you leave it alone. But I don't think that's an option for us here. We need to do something. And whatever it is that we do, it's valid for someone to consider that to be manipulation if it's valid for anything to be considered manipulation. And I don't get these word games. Well, I do get these word games, and he seems like an awesome guy, but unfortunately, this tradition of word games is put in place to fuck with you. It's put in place to mess with your critical thinking. So I don't like it, even when it comes from good people who sound great and have good things to say. So Lucas, sorry, but I don't like that. Anyway.
Below the back sides of your tongue. Manipulation or the raising of the larynx. When you raise your larynx, you feel a lift below the back sides of your tongue. As though you're about to gargle water. It actually mimics the sensation of gagging or vomiting. And you end up sounding like this.
That's bullshit. So, I'm sure you raise your larynx when you gargle. Okay. Because probably you're closing the palatopharyngeal sphincter, and the water is not getting anywhere near your larynx anyway. But generally speaking, raising your larynx to sing, especially if you know what you're doing, and that's what you meant to do, does not feel like gagging or vomiting. It's just bullshit. It's a pretty typical bias, in my opinion, that you see in classical people, where we feel like everything we do must be the natural and right way, and what other people do must be the wrong way or the manipulated way or wrong somehow. And to me, it's not even that it's stupid. It's like immature, infantile. It's like, what are we, toddlers? That's on the level of someone who has never left their hometown, who believes that people from other places have accents, and who really still believes that they don't have an accent. That it's the like they don't realize that they're not self-aware enough and aware of others enough to realize that to someone else from a different place, you're the one with the accent. So if you're coming from contemporary singing, not that you sing everything with your high larynx, but let's say you're singing from gospel and you're belting a lot. When you sing your high notes, you're raising your larynx. And it's the classical singers like me and Lucas who are manipulating. So it's bullshit.
As a young singer, relaxing my larynx. When you raise your larynx, you feel a lift below the back sides of your tongue, as though you're about to gargle water. It actually mimics the sensation of gagging or vomiting, and you end up sounding like this. As a young singer...
I don't know all of these stars. These are, I guess, these they all have great lighting. I know Kermit, and I can assure you that yes, to sound like Kermit, part of it is going to be raising your larynx, but also protracting your neck. And I don't see him talking about protracting your neck, but here's the other thing. I have a pretty good Kermit the Frog. I can do this vocal coordination, and I've even listened to quite a few Muppets recordings over the years, and I've worked somewhat on my Kermit the Frog vocal coordination, right? I bet you Lucas can't do Kermit the Frog like I can. I bet you. His Kermit the Frog, I bet you, because he didn't, I could be wrong, but I bet you, he hasn't practiced his Kermit the Frog as much as I have, and I sound like Kermit the Frog, and he can't do it. I'm not anywhere as near as good as my Kermit the Frog, right? And whoever these two other artists are, and I know, I suck for not knowing. One of them kind of looks like Christina Aguilera, but I don't think that's Christina Aguilera. But anyway, I'm sure that these people sing with a high larynx, right? But if Lucas tried to do their job, he wouldn't last 2 minutes because they have a different skill set. These are very skilled people, and just raising your larynx doesn't make you sound like this. Not even close. So this gets a screaming goat bullshit score because, and well deserved, Lucas, because opera singers need to stop saying that what other artists do that we can't do and that would take us years to get good at doing is more than just bad opera singing. I saw this on a comment for a couple live streams ago that the one singer I was looking at, and it was meant as an insult that he sounded, or as a criticism, whatever, that he sounded like a good pop singer. But he did not sound like a good pop singer. He could not get jobs as a pop singer. That's hard to do. And if you tried to do it, Mr., Ms., whoever you are, opera singer, classical teacher, you would find yourself completely outmatched by the competition. Because it's hard. Singing contemporary music is hard, and it's not just raising your larynx. So anyway. Oh, hi, I can't pronounce your name. It looks like a Korean name, but I can't pronounce it. So, but welcome to Mr. Opera. If you got a comment or question, then let me know. Yeah, so anyway, let's go on here.
Relaxing my larynx. Gargle water. It actually mimics the sensation of gagging or vomiting, and you end up sounding like this. As a young singer, relaxing my larynx was my biggest hurdle. So what did I do to counteract it? Sing, stop, relax.
Okay. So here's I don't know what to score this as. As a young singer, I guarantee you, his number one problem was not relaxing his larynx. His number one problem was that he didn't have the skill set he needed to be able to sing the genre of music that he wanted to sing. That's the biggest problem, right? When it comes to classical singers, none of them, when they're starting out, have the problem that their larynx is too strong or working too well or anything like that. They have weakness and lack of coordination, and also they lack the mental image of what it is that they want to do in the first place. What shape do they want to make with their vocal tract? And then over time, as you train, if you're building good maps of your vocal tract and actually providing yourself with good feedback, you can develop your sense of how well you can feel different parts of your vocal tract. So your access to information that's coming from your vocal tract to tell you what shape it's currently in improves with time if you're working in a way that's giving you information that corresponds to reality. If the information doesn't correspond to reality, what you wind up having to do is build up a whole bunch of layers of cognitive dissonance in order to keep functioning. And some are more subtle than others, and some are less subtle. But yeah, so those are the challenges for a young singer. There's a lot of them. But none of them actually have the challenge that Douglas Stanley put in his book Hints on Your Voice, which Lucas is kind of repeating the concept from here, which is that the main barrier to producing a big, clear, powerful sound is an inability to relax, as opposed to an inability to generate force, to generate tension, to generate pressure, force in a precise and controlled way to get the desired result. It's a little bit like if you want to throw a really hard punch, if you box, and you want to throw a really hard punch, it absolutely is important to know how to relax during the throwing of the punch. But the primary thing that you're doing is force production still. It's still about this explosion of force, and it's still about tension and creating that force, not about relaxing and releasing and hoping that your arm just for some reason throws a really hard punch. It's not going to happen. Yeah, so okay, so if I was watching someone sing that phrase and they want their larynx to go lower, I would say, open your mouth. On every vowel, open your mouth more. So if his chin, for every time he opens his jaw, were to wind up in a lower position, his larynx would be lowered. And that would just be simple, like position and motion. So this kind of irritates me that often in these demonstrations, like the teacher is telling you, for instance, like this is incorrect because it's larynx raising, but then they're doing a bunch of other stuff that they don't actually do when they sing. in order to show you this demonstration. And then you go to apply it, and you think that the lesson was about raising your larynx, and you missed everything, like the fact that the mouth is in this position.
Oh mio tesoro.
Again, when you see the lips come out on the E vowel, if it's unintentional, you know you're looking for more length in the vocal tract. So that's something you can look at. But just relaxing your larynx, that's not gonna do anything. Nothing's gonna happen. I'll put it to you this way: if you relax your larynx, how is it going down? If you relax all the extrinsic muscles of your larynx, then it's going to go wherever the surrounding parts go. Anything that pulls on it is going to pull it. So it doesn't make any sense. We're told that we have to have a relaxed larynx, and then we're told that we also have to have a stable larynx. Right? So it's going a little bit more.
Remember, sing where you speak. Your speaking voice should be the most
Turn this up a bit.
natural sound you can make.
It's really soft. Okay.
If all else fails, heat up an
I don't know if you caught it. This idea that he said.
sensation of gagging or vomiting. And you
I was
end up
taught this
sounding
in
like
school.
this. As a young singer, relaxing my larynx was my biggest
Well, I'll
hurdle.
just keep-
So
let it
what did
go
I do
until we get to it.
counteract? Sing, stop, relax.
Vieni alla finestra. Oh mio tesoro.
Remember, sing where you speak. Your speaking voice should be the most uninhibited, natural sound you can make.
Okay. That's like that one is oh, what happened?
I got my.
What
Oh, that one's really driving me nuts. Oh God, what
have I done?
Sing where you speak. Sing where you speak. Your speaking voice is the most relaxed, natural way to produce the sound. And that's why you talk that way.
Right, but maybe you don't like your speaking voice. What if, what if you want your speaking voice to be louder and clearer? Especially, like, what if you frequently walk into rooms and you open up your voice to talk and you practice to do it one way and it comes out a completely different way? Like way smaller and way more restrained than what you wanted to do. You need real advice, right? And everything that could be wrong with your voice when you're singing can be wrong when you're speaking. How does it's like you're not going to It's like they're both vocalizations. If you're coming for help with your vocalizations, and what you need is help with your vocalization. Obviously, if you're already capable of vocalizing perfectly, then just do that. Sing where you speak, I guess. Because you're speaking well. You're speaking exactly the way you want to. But what if you're not speaking the way you want to? And what if, like, you woke up one day and you realized, I have like 4, 5, 6 voices that I can use when I speak. I have an inside voice, outside voice. I've got all these voices. And this speaking voice is as variable and as awesome and as cool as my singing voice. They're this because it's the same voice. It's just me making different sounds, right? So these aren't helpful things for us. It works once in a while by accident. Guys like Lucas, who are extremely talented and already just exploring all the time with their voices anyway, they're going to come up with something. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here for people who are like me. I was also talented like Lucas. I went out there, but also I'm very analytical and I'm good at breaking down what people told me. And if I'm told that this is what you have to do and it's going to make it sound good, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to, and then if it doesn't work, I'm going to wonder what am I doing wrong? I'm not going to think, is this whole thing a freaking scam that was invented around the time that the phonograph was invented by people who were not actually teaching professional singers or responsible for anyone who needed to do an actual job in an opera house, but maybe like actually the voice teacher from the Barber of Seville, people who were there to like train your daughter to be easier to marry to someone, or to keep your keep some noble guy occupied with his hobby of singing or whatever. Like these people who were helping dilettantes, people who just wanted a hobby. They made vocal pedagogy. And I think like the people who were training people in the theater, they got forgotten. They got completely forgotten. And that's what we're left with now, is things like this that are scammy. It's completely scammy to tell someone looking for help with their vocalization to just rely on their vocalization to help them. Just use your vocal. It's like the Think, what is it? What's that musical with 76 trombones? The Music Man. It's like that you're somehow just supposed to come up with the answers yourself. Yeah, so that's, yeah. And, hey, Jay Irving, welcome. Welcome to Mr. Opera. So, what I wanted to talk about is something I call larynx diving. Because I think there is this problem built into lowering your larynx that people run into. And I was a little bit rushed before the live stream, so I don't know if you guys want me to look it up. We can try to pull up the study. But in Complete Vocal Technique, so the Complete Vocal Institute has shown these different vocal modes that people use. And they've identified 4 vocal modes. And these vocal modes have different qualities. And you can think of it as it's like if chest and head was a one-dimensional understanding of the voice. When you combine the concepts of vocal modes and vocal density and sound color from Complete Vocal Technique, it's like moving into 3 dimensions. And for me, it's a little bit like I was trying to understand the voice in 1 dimension, like chest and head, and the voice is more like in 3 dimensions. And it's very difficult to find your way around a room or around a 3-dimensional space if your map is 1-dimensional. But then if you give like 1,000 one-dimensional maps to 1,000 people and they try to find their way, like some people are gonna find their way anyway. So that's how I think of what we do with this chest and head thing. That it doesn't help us build a map. It doesn't help us find our way. but then we keep using it because at the same time as it doesn't help us find our way, we often do tests and we can see that there's a difference between going in this way and this other direction. So even when we think in just one dimension, we can find a difference between one thing and another in the voice, right? But in complete vocal technique, they're thinking of things more in 3 dimensions. And one of the vocal modes that they have is called edge, and it has a quality to it that I would argue we conflate with chest voice, and that's called the metallic quality. And if I demonstrate for you real quickly, if I make a sound, I can make it quieter. I can make it louder. No matter how loud I make that sound, it's not going to become metallic. But if I use a different sound like this more twangy sound, when I start to lean into it and add pressure, it makes this what we call metal. It's got a roughness to it, and we don't hear that roughness when I talk like this. When I talk like this, my voice is very smooth. But when I talk like this, it's a more rough sound. Okay, so this roughness in the sound is actually happening at the level of the vocal folds. And it's happening because of an interaction between the vocal folds and the vocal tract. And one of the main ways I'm doing it is by narrowing the epiglottis. And I call this region of the voice, this acoustic address, area of interest number 3, because we can move it around. But no matter where we move it, it's always the beginning of the vocal tract. So it's always area of interest number 3. Okay. Now, in complete vocal technique, in their studies, I noticed somewhere, and I can't remember exactly which one, but I noticed that their mode that they call edge in fuller density, so that means with the vocal folds fatter, with the vocal folds not stretched out and the sound really thick. So in fuller density, this sound tends to go away when the larynx is lowered. And even to the point that, as far as I know, the head of complete vocal technique doesn't believe you can sing in fuller density edge mode, they call it. One of these fuller, these more metallic vocal modes in fuller density. They don't believe you can do it with a low larynx. Now, I really beg to disagree. And I think it can be done with a gesture that I call larynx diving. And so larynx diving is the whole topic here. Oh my God. I didn't mean to do that. Accidentally hit the untrue thing. Larynx diving is the topic that we're talking about today. I'm just going to reset this count because we're done with the bullshit inspector. I think Lucas was bullshitting us a bit. But this 3-year-old video, maybe he's not so bullshitty today. And I just wanted a conversation piece to start talking about lowering the larynx. So when we talk about the position of the larynx, I think we have to start saying low relative to what? So when Lucas is talking about a low larynx, what does he mean? And like if you're watching now, how do you define a low larynx? Is what? Where are you looking? Where are you feeling? he's saying, I guess when you yawn, you have a lower larynx position. Okay, well, when I yawn, I have a lower larynx position, right? But also, if I yawn and I then try to maintain this feeling, what can you notice about my voice? Oh, oh, am I metallic right now? Oh, with this yawn sensation? I would say no. No, I am not metallic. When I start to speak with a metallic sound, oh, my larynx goes up. But I'm speaking. But we can say maybe we found this problem that when I yawn, this sound, goes away. The roughness in the voice goes away when I yawn. The metal goes away in the sound when I yawn. But then can I find ways to sing with my larynx low and not have that happen? And is there any way I could manipulate things to try to figure out what's going on? And yes, okay. So if you take your fingers and feel for the top of your thyroid cartilage, or just start with the point of the thyroid cartilage, Adam's apple, and if I yawn, you can see it goes down there. Okay, so if I follow this cartilage with my finger, right on top, there's a little ring of bone. This is an actual bone. It's called the hyoid bone. It's got these two little horns in the front that I can feel. They're called cornu, which is just Latin for horns, right? And there is this thyrohyoid membrane. There's a membrane between the two, between the body of the thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone. And there's muscle between there, and I can feel that they're stuck together, the hyoid and the thyroid. Now, if I put my finger in the spot where they join, and I do this yawn, well, that's interesting. There's a gap that forms. Right now, there's a gap between the hyoid and the thyroid whenever I make this sound. And that's interesting to me. That's interesting to me because if we look at how the larynx gets down, it implies that this thyroid cartilage is being pulled down harder than the hyoid bone is somehow. Because if the hyoid bone were being pulled down as well, I wouldn't be experiencing this gap forming between the two. And Jay Irving, I'll get to your question in a second. Let me just finish my thought because I have ADHD, so I lose my train of thought really easily. So hold on, what was I talking about? Yes. So when I did totally lose my train of thought now after I said that. Let's hide this count. So yes, when I want to lower my larynx, if my thyroid is being pulled down harder than the hyoid, I get this gap forming between the two. And if I look at what are the ways to lower the larynx, I find three ways. And you can look these up or you can just believe me. The first way is by means of pulling the trachea down and I used to think that this was actually the pulling directly just on the trachea from the bottom or something, and therefore that this kind of gesture, when the trachea is somehow pulled down, would separate the thyroid cartilage from the hyoid. But then I found out that the way this happens is your diaphragm is connected to this kind of rope of something called fascia. Fascia, and this deep fascia goes up your body, around your heart, and then becomes fascia again on the other side, and then it goes up into your throat area, and that it's the reason you're able to basically use your diaphragm to lower your larynx. But then when I started looking into how this is connected exactly, it looks like it's connected to the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is on top of the thyroid cartilage. So if we were pulling the hyoid bone down, we shouldn't be getting this gap in between the two. The other ways your larynx can get down are with the infrahyoid muscles. So these are muscles that go one from your shoulder, and I guess I'll type this in the chat. The omohyoideus muscles, they go from the scapula to the hyoid bone. But the hyoid bone is this little ring of bone that I showed you that was sitting on top of your thyroid. So if you're pulling down from the hyoid in any way, that doesn't explain at all why you get a gap in between the two. It doesn't make any sense. There's also infrahyoid muscles in the front of the body coming from the sternum, and they go to the hyoid bone. And that, again, doesn't help us, right? Because that's pulling down the hyoid. But then under these muscles, right under these muscles, running parallel, connected to your chest, are these two muscles called the sternothyroideus muscles. So, omohyoideus, and we had sternohyoideus, right? But then we have sternothyroideus. Sternothyroideus sneaks under the sternohyoideus and attaches to the thyroid cartilage. That, to me, is the only explanation for what's going on. So when you do the yawn coordination, I'm saying it looks a whole lot like you're pulling on the sternothyroid muscles. And this makes the yawn coordination. This makes the larynx lowering that you get when you do the yawn. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that before performance if your larynx is high, if you were trying to sing with fuller density. Because
This is what yawning does to your voice. It takes the middle out of the sound, and it kind of pushes me into this. I mean, I sound like Stefan Zucker.
Dovrebbe un cantante servirsi della voce di petto?
No.
yeah, that's yawning. I think he's doing that's sort of like beware. That's what it is there. That's the yawn. So swallowing is another funny one. Swallowing does all the things that your larynx can do. Swallowing has raising the larynx. It has larynx in the middle, and it has the larynx all the way down. It has all of those. So that, again, boggles my mind as to why this is supposed to help us, because this swallowing is equally working on laryngeal elevation as it is depression. And then the other thing is, when you swallow, your mouth is closed. So I would suggest before a performance, you want to be focused on warm-up techniques and exercises that you can do with your mouth open, because that's going to be what you're doing on stage, not lowering or raising your larynx with your mouth closed. Doesn't matter what your larynx does when your mouth is closed. Now I'm gonna check this question. Jay Irving, yeah. So the question is, me and Tony Linka, who's awesome, by the way. I think everyone should consider checking in with Tony Linka for if not for a lesson, then for a coaching or some kind of consultation or something. Even if you're just like, if you're singing Tosca, can you imagine like you get to the screaming part and you've got your screams coached with like a real screaming coach? I think that would be just sweet, just awesome. Or like, you know, I guess it's not a detail that's on big on people's minds, but I think these kinds of things are cool. So yeah. Anyway, so me and Tony Linka were talking about metal the other day. He said I needed more metal in my sound, lower, to get higher, chestier sounds. And I'm gonna see if I can make it pop up again. No, that doesn't work. Oh yeah, there we go. I'm thinking metal could be related to fold adduction and pressure. Yeah, so Jay Irving, metal is related to fold adduction because you need enough resistance to get the metal started. Metal relies on this feedback loop, an acoustic feedback loop, and you need so you need enough resistance to generate the pressure that you're going to need to start that feedback loop. It's sometimes tricky to know if people really mean adduction or if they mean a combination of adduction and epilaryngeal narrowing, which is usually, I think, what they mean. Usually, I think, so adduction, talking about adduction would be like if you're talking about making a fist or something like that, and you're, and you're only focused on sticking the fingers together or something, but not on this part. And yeah, it's true that your fingers do have to be stuck together, like to make the fist. You can't have your fingers spread, right? But the gesture is a lot more than just two pieces of it that you singled out and put together. So if you think of it like a laryngeal gesture that includes the epiglottis, probably what you're feeling is including more of that rather than less of that. I find it really hard to believe if someone is saying that they can feel their vocal folds and somehow they experience that separately from the epiglottis. It's like, no. I mean, like when I make a fist, like I don't have a sense of the differentiation of all of these like 300 something muscles or something like that. I have a sense of making a fist. So I think so I don't know what you mean is the thing. Fold adduction to me is usually, it's a combination of adduction plus epilaryngeal narrowing. So, yeah. If you just, but also you're technically true. And then also that's really good advice that he's giving you, because metal gives you this boost in the 2500 to 3500 range, like a lot of it And if you're singing a lower pitch, then the more high resonance you have, the better. But when you're singing higher pitches, that's not so relevant anymore. You're already singing high. So it doesn't matter to have high overtones if you're singing high. I mean, it's all the same overtones anyway, but yeah. So I'm just somebody asked me if the stream is on right now. I'm going to invite this person to join us. So, yeah, and I'm going to turn off this so that the alerts aren't yeah, so but yeah, so Jay, but that's really good advice though that he's giving you. So I think that's it though. To me the hard part is the epilaryngeal narrowing. Although I think it's more straightforward with the high larynx. With the low larynx, that's why that's I guess the point I wanted to get into. This epilaryngeal narrowing with the low larynx is it's more complicated. It's not, the gesture itself is not that complicated, but then articulating words and stuff, and also keeping the larynx there, and navigating different registers and stuff, it gets difficult. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, it looks like yep. So it looks like today I didn't push this one little button where I have to push go live. And I'm streaming on 2 channels at the same time cuz I got the stream key from This Is Opera. So I guess tonight was interacted a lot with This Is Opera night. But the whole stream will be there. And then I guess I'll delete this and upload this when it's but if you go over to This Is Opera, find the live stream there, and then you can tune in from the beginning. So I would do that. That should work. Anyway, yeah, sorry, Mr. Opera. My primary channel didn't get streamed to today. I'm streaming only on my troll channel. No, it's not my channel. Who knows who This Is Opera belongs to. But I have the stream key. Anyway. Yeah. And you know what's the funny part is that these people hate me from This Is Opera. Oh, whoops. I'm just gonna move this over here because these people hate me from This Is Opera, but honestly, I think my tips are gonna get them a lot closer to sounding old school than the tips that they're trying to follow, because I think the way this works is, and it's really ironic, and it's really like, I don't know, not Catch-22, but what is Kafka? It's Kafka-esque. But I think the way that we got what Lucas is doing here, which I would consider modern, this is the modern pedagogy that they're complaining about over on This Is Opera. I think that that the way we got to today, to the situation that they're complaining about, is actually by taking the advice that they're trying to force on everybody. That's the hilarious part. So what Lucas is saying today here about, relaxing and releasing and all of this stuff, the way he's saying this is all straight out of Douglas Stanley's Your Voice. This is it. This is all this stuff. And they're pissed off about a situation that is the result of people taking the advice from the generations before. And they never stop to think, how is it that the later generations got lost? How is it that we got from A to B? But then if you look at what they were saying that they did, and you compare it to just those things that we know for sure, like so epilaryngeal narrowing, for instance, and how metal works and all that, we know for sure. We are not confused about this anymore. Nobody studying vocal acoustics for real actually thinks that you need to, in order to make a big sound, that you need to increase your space, your resonance space, and because big rooms make big resonance or whatever bullshit it is that they're just completely pulled out of your ass. It's nothing to do with these kinds of acoustics. So all of that comes from this New York school. These concepts are like, this is basically the old school concepts. But nobody serious really believes you have to open your throat. But you can find all of this stuff in these previous generations. And few put together that they definitely weren't doing that, but that they were saying that they did do that. What's the obvious result? It's cognitive dissonance. It's everyone being completely fucking confused. And it's this like whole institution based on gaslighting that got built up, where like up is down, down is up, and nothing means anything, etc., etc. And yeah. Anyway, so larynx diving. The idea with larynx diving is that complete vocal technique isn't wrong if you consider okay, let's get the New School Singer thing up. So in New School Singing, we have position, motion, and attitude. And I'm going to take the chat down for a second. So if you consider high larynx, shall we say, to be merely a position. Let me get some. Do I have background music here? Just, I feel like some background music should play. Yeah, okay. So if what is raised larynx? Is it a position? Or is it attitude? Where is it raising to? Or is it emotion? Where is it going? Can the larynx be raised if the highest it can currently go isn't very high? So let's say the larynx doesn't include the hyoid bone. And if you're watching on Mr. Opera, head over to This Is Opera and subscribe over there too, because then the whole stream will be there. And then I suppose I have to do this. So before I go into the actual lesson, then I have to do this. All right. Yeah. Gotta pay the bills, you know? So if you consider the low larynx to be a position, then I have to say, like, in relation to what? What is it low in relation to? If it's low in relation to your hyoid, then every time you have a lowered larynx, you're going to have a dopey sound. So, I don't know. But what if you considered raising the larynx a motion? So towards as some kind of tension. So maybe it doesn't look like it's going anywhere, but it's a kind of motion, which results in an attitude of trying to go somewhere, I guess. And let's say that somewhere is the hyoid bone, so that you're pulling the thyroid cartilage into the hyoid bone. And your vocal folds are inside this thyroid cartilage. And let's say that your vocal folds, for some reason we do or don't understand, that we don't care about now, but for some reason, when your larynx has this attitude of being raised, it behaves one way, and when it has this attitude of being lowered, it behaves this other way, inside. And let's say that complete vocal technique is right, that when the larynx has the attitude, or even the motion, of being lowered, or even the position, of being lowered away from the hyoid bone, then everything they say is true. But let's say that it's being raised, its attitude is that it's being raised or pulled into the hyoid bone, but it just so happens your hyoid bone is pulled all the way down close to your sternum. Well, now, as far as your larynx is concerned on the inside, it's being raised. Let's say. I'm kind of theorizing here. But, so your attitude can still be of raising, but its actual position could be down. So this concept of larynx diving that I came up with is a way to differentiate this kind of larynx lowering, which could result in like a very similar position if what you're looking at is the thyroid cartilage. And let's say, because people don't tend to actually state where it is that they're referring to, right? But you're not looking at the thyroid cartilage floating in space in a room in front of you. When you say it's high or when you say it's low, right? That's independent of whether I sat down or stood up. But it's relative to something. So what is it relative to? Well, I guess it would be relative to the other parts that you can see around. So maybe relative to the jaw. So if I do this, maybe you're looking here. And you see that it goes down in relation to this. Or maybe you're looking in relation to my chin. And you see this relationship change. You see these shadows forming here. And you say, my larynx is low. All right, but maybe to simplify things, we could say that when we lower the hyoid, or when we lower the thyroid, it goes towards the sternum. This muscle this is going to get shorter. Or it could be going towards the scapula, and the omohyoideus is getting shorter, right? But either way, this line, when I raise it, and it's all the way up here, this line is longer than when I put it down here. Then this line gets shorter. And that's the position. But if I have my larynx being pulled up, or my thyroid being pulled up, and I have my hyoid bone at the same time being pulled down, then the position could look really low, right? But the attitude is the same as if it's high. And now I could be getting these very powerful sounds that Complete Vocal Technique talks about, these fuller density sounds. So how do we do that? The ways to lower the hyoid are a few. And it's all going to involve extrinsic laryngeal muscles and even more, infrahyoid and suprahyoid muscles. And these muscles are going to need tension. And you have to coordinate that tension in order to get the result that you want. For me, there are two main types of larynx dives. And maybe I should explain what it is that makes me call it larynx diving. The word comes from when I was watching someone use this, and this guy tended to sing everything in his middle voice with the nose kind of open and the larynx really kind of relaxed and maybe like not stabilized, sort of in the middle, maybe even a bit high, but I could see his larynx wasn't lowered in any kind of obvious way. It wasn't stabilized into a low position. So when he would go for like big high notes, and yes, I did lose my train of thought there. It's ADHD. That is the sound coming from the other room. Christopher, welcome. Christopher came on to the live chat and said hello. So Christopher, welcome. I lost my train of thought, but I was talking about, yes, larynx diving. And when he went to these high notes and they would suddenly become fuller density edge with not a hint of nasality in the sound, etc., the larynx would look like it was like diving, like it was suddenly going down really far as he could go, really fast and really hard, and it was every time he went for a high note. And I was like, what is that? Looks like his larynx is diving. And I started working in the mirror and stuff, and I noticed, yes, I do this too. And then I started noticing a lot of people use it. And you can actually have your larynx lower, even if you're singing lower in pitch, but it becomes often useful to let it come up a little bit and have a smaller mouth position, because you can save a little bit of energy. You might not need all of that sound, etc., etc. So how do we do this larynx diving? The key, I think, is that instead of lowering my larynx, you're going to think about controlling your hyoid bone. Controlling the hyoid bone is going to happen with these three main ways. The diaphragm, we talked about it before, doing the tracheal tugging, and for that to happen, it's mostly about what you can't do. You cannot sing all the way to the end of your breath unless you're willing to give up your tracheal tugging. Your tracheal tugging will go away as your diaphragm rises. That's not necessarily bad. If you have a really long phrase, you might need that. You might have to manage it, whatever. But in my opinion, this is where Caruso's advice comes from. And that probably didn't actually come from Caruso, but there's this famous idea that you are going to breathe deeply as if smelling a rose. And then you're only going to sing with a thimbleful of air. In other words, your lungs are mostly full most of the time. What that does is it puts your diaphragm really low, which gives you tracheal tugging, or at least the potential for tracheal tugging as long as the tension is there on the diaphragm. If you breathe deeply and you see your diaphragm go down, that's tracheal tugging. So that's easy. Manage your breath so that you take full breaths, not little baby breaths. And then however much you did that is how much your infrahyoids will not need to work to get your hyoid down. For some people, that's a matter of like, you're not strong enough. That's it. It's just, you're not strong enough. It's not magic. It's not like you need special resonance, you know. It's just, it's not...
Body. The energy extends past your limbs and becomes fire.
Yeah, not bad. It's just, you're not strong enough, and that's why you can't take a big breath. And if you just did, I don't know, 90 days of weightlifting or something like that, probably you would fix that problem. Or you would have enough strength that you could easily overcome it. And then other things get in the way of that, like cardio. So if you're out of breath, you're probably not able to function this way. But anyway, so that aside, let's say you've got your breath stuff solved. The next biggest thing to worry about is not the infrahyoids, but the suprahyoids. The suprahyoids are able to pull the hyoid up. And they get their name because that's what they do. But in my opinion, they get their name because that's what they do when you're swallowing. That's important, when you're swallowing. Because when you're swallowing, the origins of these muscles are in particular locations. The suprahyoids are the muscles that go from the hyoid bone at the top of your larynx to different structures that are above, assuming your mouth is closed. They are the chin, that's the digastric muscles, the digastric muscle, digrastic sometimes called, but digastric muscle, goes from your hyoid bone to the chin. And when you that one is really cool because it doesn't connect directly to the hyoid bone. It passes through loops on each side of the hyoid bone, on right around these horns that you can feel in the front. There's like a sheath, there's a loop, and these muscles go through those loops. They become intermediate tendon, and this intermediate tendon passes through the loops, comes out the other side, and connects to temporal process? No, I can't remember the name of the processes. These two little bony processes, little protrusions near your ears, near the styloid processes. So if you think clotheslines, two clotheslines going from your chin, passing through the hyoid, and the hyoid rides on these, like, these cable cars. So your hyoid's like a cable car on these. And when you put tension on this clothesline, if you have it up above the hyoid, then it can pull up on it a little bit. And the function of this is when you swallow, it keeps the hyoid bone from making all kinds of wild things, but at the same time, it can slide up and down, right? So you don't need to have muscular coordination to make that happen. It just happens automatically, mechanically, that the hyoid bone can slide up and down on these muscles. So that's the first suprahyoid muscle. Then that's from the chin, and then if you move to the jaw, to the actual jaw, you've got these mylohyoid muscles. And the mylohyoid muscles go, they're like fan-shaped kind of things, right? And they line the jaw all like for a lot of it and go to the hyoid bone. And the crazy thing about this is, yeah, that could raise your hyoid, but that's also one of the main ways you open your jaw. So your larynx, yes, is the house where your voice lives, where your vocal folds live. But then if you look at this function of like opening your jaw, especially extremely opening your jaw, it's your larynx that's pulling your jaw open. Okay, the hyoid bone is not considered part of the larynx, right? But that's in anatomy books. In your actual real life, the way that you use it, it's one thing. It's part of your larynx. It's probably the main. When you talk about your larynx, you probably should have said hyoid. When people talk about lowering the larynx, for instance, they usually meant lowering their hyoid. And when they meant raising their larynx, they probably meant raising their hyoid. That's actually the main action that they were doing. And if they were trying to train, that would be the main thing they need to look at, is hyoid raising and hyoid lowering. And coordinating that with whatever it is that they were trying to do. So, we've got these two suprahyoid muscles so far, going from the chin and the jaw to this little bone that's on top of your larynx. Then you've got more going to the ears, basically, or to the pharynx. The need to pull up KenHub maybe. No, not so much, because they're not so important. So we're basically going from the chin to the hyoid, and from the hyoid to the ears. We have this system for raising it. The important thing to notice about this system, and it often gets this bad reputation in singing because they call it like the swallowing muscles or something, especially this digastric muscle. Yes, it raises your larynx when you're swallowing. But think about, where is it pulling from, and then where is it pulling to? If it's pulling from your chin to your hyoid, or from your hyoid to your chin, and your chin is currently not actually above your hyoid, how is it raising your larynx? It can't. It's actually contributing to stabilizing your larynx now in a lower position. So think of the digastric muscle going from your hyoid to your chin, not as a larynx elevator, not as something that raises your larynx, but as something that stabilizes your larynx and tells it, don't move from there, stay on this level. But if your mouth is very open, that's not going to raise your larynx. Well, it's just going to pull it towards your chin. Or even if it's just riding on these, like a cable car, and the distance between the digastric and the hyoid is actually really short, then all of the tension is going to be leading from this very short distance to the ears. And you're not generating the same hyoid elevation that you would be when your mouth is closed. And the same with the mylohyoid. The jaw, if it's not actually above this level, isn't going to be contributing to raising your larynx. It's stabilizing your larynx. Could be in a low position if your mouth is open. So when we're watching Lucas, you know, it's like, well, if you wanted to lower your larynx, open your mouth. When you open your mouth, your hyoid's not going to have a reason to go up, and then you're fine. So that's the second group of muscles, these suprahyoid muscles. Then the third group of muscles to coordinate is the infrahyoid muscles. That's, we mentioned already, going from the sternum to the hyoid and from the shoulders to the hyoid bone. If you can use these to get the position that you needed, then you could raise your larynx into that. Anyone looking from the outside is saying your larynx is low relative to your sternum. But someone who's you might say, well, it feels like it's going up. It just looks like it's down. It is down. It's being raised as far as it'll go, which isn't far. So, hope that's clear. Because this third way is kind of tricky, well, this third part that contributes is kind of tricky, you might notice when you start to try lowering your hyoid bone that it often just won't go down. You can't figure out how to make it go down, or you go up in pitch or something and it doesn't go down, it goes up. It does what Lucas is talking about. Probably does what Lucas is talking about because you're trying to hang on to a thicker, fuller sound. Then we need to get these infrahyoid muscles working for us, these omohyoideus muscles, running from your shoulder to the larynx and from the chest to the larynx. And that to me says we need to start working with the posture, so that we're combining a big breath. Number one, big breath. Number two, an open mouth to get the suprahyoid muscles into a position that doesn't raise the larynx. Let's bring this back up. And then we need the infrahyoids contributing so that we get some kind of hyoid lowering besides that. The infrahyoids, since they're connected to your shoulders and your chest, aren't just going to do what you want because you wish it. Instead, what you have to do is reshape the whole rib cage. And that's why you start to see these very, very distinct postures on the stage, on the opera stage. And you can see that they're going to go with particular sounds. Larynx diving option number 1. Well, it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure of the mechanics of how it works, but it often seems to go with head rotation, upwards head rotation, when the mouth opening wants to get larger. So especially when going up in pitch. So that you see people opening the mouth, sometimes a little bit ridiculously, like the Canadians on South Park, or like a Pez dispenser. Pez dispenser is this toy that you put candy into, and then when you pull on the head of the toy, like the mouth opens, like, and the candy pops out. The idea here is that you stabilize the hyoid, I think, to the chest. And as much as you pull up, it's not going to raise. But then when you want to open your mouth, you've got nowhere to go. So that you have to rotate the head to get it open. This uses more pushing forward of the chest, more expansion in the front of the body. The other way I can use to do this larynx diving gesture, which is, I guess it's a different larynx diving gesture, is to flex the back, to use flexion in the back. You may hear people refer to breathing in the back, these kinds of things. And here the idea is that... let me think about it for a second. You can think of it as you stabilize the front part of yourself, and then you're going to be flexing your back so that your shoulders wind up pulling down the larynx, and that especially this tracheal tug becomes stronger. I think you reshape your torso, and it winds up putting your larynx lower. The thing that we're avoiding in both cases
is this yawning idea. Instead of this yawning idea, you can think about...
In the second one, tongue retraction. And in the first one, I would maybe even think about raising your larynx or about pushing your tongue into your chin, something like that. So I'll give you maybe a quick demonstration. So let's start with the more open version. This, as I get above what people call the passaggio, is when I start to rotate. That's how that works. The larynx. As I go up, drops a little bit. So that's what we're going to see. And in the other version, I arrange my back, and shall we say I cover from the front, and I'm thinking about making room in the back of my rib cage to pull the middle of myself down, I guess. And you see this downward reinforcement, I guess, of the larynx. And the more I go up, the more that is. So the higher the pitch goes, the more the larynx diving sets in. And this to me is what solves the problem of fuller density metallic singing and with the low larynx. Some things worth pointing out is that low larynx doesn't... So what I defined is low larynx measured in relation to the sternum. But what if your definition of a low larynx is how far is the larynx from the end of the vocal tract? That's really weird, right? Because then if my larynx, for instance, stays here, but I go like this. Did I lower my larynx? And let's say my larynx stayed here, and I went like this. Did I raise my larynx? I think that helps show that the problem with talking about raising and lowering the larynx is that it's not acoustically significant. The larynx is high or low, not in relation to anything in the vocal tract if we're talking about the sternum. But then if it is in relation to the lips, it's not in relation to anything fixed. I mean, you can move your head around and you have different lengths. So that I find extremely confusing. So what I got instead is I have a concept I call area of interest number 1. And area of interest number 1 is a measure of the total length of the vocal tract, its shape in general. And it is that shape according to the shortest line to get from the beginning to the end. So let's say that we have this area of interest number 1. The interesting thing about it is we can ask about its position. So if let's say that I draw a line from wherever I think my vocal folds are to the end of my vocal tract. And whatever you think this line is, that's fine. You know, if your anatomy knowledge is not as good as mine or better than mine or whatever, maybe your idea of what is going on inside, like the shape inside, is different from mine. But whatever, that doesn't matter. You have some sense of the beginning of your vocal tract and the end of your vocal tract. All of that together, if you make it into just one dimension, make it into just one line, that's area of interest number 1. So if area of interest number 1 is here, then think about this frame that you're looking at. Whoops, sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. So if I'm doing this, right, I am moving area of interest number 1 around. When I'm changing the shape of my neck, I'm changing the shape of area of interest number 1. When I'm raising and lowering my larynx, I'm changing the shape of and the length and the position of area of interest number 1. When I'm changing the opening of my mouth even. So if I go from this position to this position, I've changed area of interest number 1 because the shortest line is now a different line. It got shorter. If I do this, I have changed the shape of area of interest number 1. And I could take this shape and move it around. And I'm changing, now I'm changing the position of area of interest number 1. So there's a motion that's implied. And if I needed to, I could organize myself and think about what is the nature of that motion. Is this motion good or bad? Could I make this motion better? Is this motion messing me up somehow? Etc., etc. Yeah. So that's how that works. So I suggest area of interest number 1, as opposed to talking about laryngeal, is your larynx high or low? Because what you actually needed to know was if your vocal tract were just a straight tube, what would be its resonating frequency? And that's based on how long it is. And you use that, whether you know it or not. You use it when you speak, you use it when you sing. the length of your vocal tract. It's like the math that you start with. Before you make constrictions and expansions, you made area of interest number 1. And it is acoustically significant. It includes the height of your larynx, but not just the height of your larynx. So now we get to a really different idea, because when I say larynx diving, what I showed you from the point of view of anatomy is a low larynx. But from the point of view of my acoustics here, it's a short area of interest number 1. Maybe not as short as a rock singer who's got a really open mouth and a high larynx and a retracted neck. But because of this very open mouth and because of this retracted neck, which is essential for making this sound, area of interest number 1 is actually not that long. And now we get to why I think it's actually not breaking anything that CVT came up with about these vocal modes. That's why it actually is possible for us to do this with a low larynx. Is that, for one, what's happening inside, as far as like the attitude of the larynx is similar for the opera singer singing in fuller density edge as it is for the rock singer who's singing in fuller density edge. Because even though we see this position that's close to the sternum, that doesn't mean we actually have this pulling on the thyroid from the sternothyroid muscles. It could be that the thyroid is getting smashed from above and then also pulled down by the diaphragm. And if you take a look at the kind of breathing that Complete Vocal Technique recommends, they often seem to recommend an anteriorly tilted pelvis. Anterior tilt of the pelvis tells me higher diaphragm. It makes a lot of sense that people who are starting with that as their breathing aren't going to see fuller density singing with a low larynx, because the only way they're going to be lowering the larynx is going to be probably with this sternothyroid pull. Now, I could be wrong about all this. So just warning. But I'm not wrong about larynx diving and how to do it. Yeah, so I guess that's all I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to introduce the concept of larynx diving and like where it comes from. Where am I thinking these things are, like, how do I think these things are actually happening or are even possible? And this is why. It's from these particular anatomical places. And then if you ask, well, what's the point of all this? Is that we're getting into a kind of meta technique, a way of organizing techniques, a way of like staying organized and thinking of what are we doing here in voice coachings, voice lessons, etc., etc. Yeah, you need to see the tricks and tips and stuff and the techniques to use, but also along the way, you're picking up a system for making decisions. And whatever it is that you learn from me, whatever tips you get from me and use or don't use, they do what they do, and they're not going to do what they don't do. And they're going to be limited in some way. Right? I'm just me. doing what I can. But you're also working by yourself, and you're learning stuff by yourself, and you're having experiences, and the better you organize these experiences that you have about your own singing and your speaking and everything to do with your voice, I think the better off you are as far as actually working on it yourself. Everything that gets integrated is going to take you further if you have a good way of organizing your thoughts. So that's why today, going over a few times, position, motion, and attitude, and then applying it to this idea of larynx diving, and talking about area of interest number 1, because I've introduced it as this is this area of interest number 1. This is how it works. This is why it's important acoustically, etc. But then what? Well, the idea is that you can do something with it. Every area of interest, but then also every part of your vocal tract that you can come up with, or part of your body. You could even think of your thoughts this way. They have position, motion, and attitude. Position is where it is in space. When you take a position and another position, and you look at what happens between the two, you have a motion. Using position and motion, you can describe very, very complex systems of moving and being, of doing stuff, or simple ones. But all of these have something in common that unless you actually have the experience of doing them, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to understand the concept. For instance, walking. Walking is a million positions and a bunch of motions, all of which you could write down, and then someone could come by later and come up with a version of walking that is definitely walking. We would all agree it's walking, but it somehow breaks your rules. You invented some kind of funny walking. Why is it still walking? It's because walking is actually an attitude. It's not really just position and motion. Walking is it's a word we give to something that we actually don't describe. When we say walking, it doesn't tell you anything about walking. But it reminds you of walking. So attitudes evoke. Position describes. And motion describes, right? But attitude is different from those because it only evokes. If you've done it and I've done it, we can talk about the attitude. Until that happens, it's useless to you. This is why a lot of times sensation-based teaching seems like a really good idea to the teacher and does absolutely nothing for the student. Because without having the shared experience in the first place, the cues that the teacher is giving about what attitude they're supposed to experience make no sense. It's like you're explaining walking to a worm. A worm isn't going to understand walking. It doesn't even have legs. It does the worm. I can't do the worm, but it does the worm. The worm does the worm. So that's the reason for that. And I can also mention, if you're going to your teachers and you don't hear a lot of this, and you don't hear a lot of this, and everything is this, you're teaching yourself. You're just teaching yourself. And everything that this person is doing, you can do probably yourself. But at the same time, if all you're getting is this, and all you're doing is this, and you get up on stage and you expect this and this and this and this to be a cool performance, you're probably gonna miss it. Probably gonna miss it. And it's usually a sign you didn't practice enough. By the time you work on position and motion and make them comfortable, and by the time you can do it, it goes from a series of steps to like, it just goes like this. Now it's an attitude. So that's the idea there, and help you resolve this conflict between details and the big picture that can really, it can. I understand people who are right now suffering from too many details might come across some of the things I'm saying and be like, "It's too many details. I already have too many details. Do not give me more details." And that makes sense. But that doesn't mean details will always be your enemy. Right? So at some point, everyone gets lost in details, right? But at some point, everyone also gets sloppy, and because they're relying too much on the big picture, they lose the big picture. So the idea is that instead of saying position is the most important thing, or saying motion is the most important thing, and that's out there. There's people out there that are saying, no, don't use any imagery. You shouldn't ever do anything subjective. Everything should be science and details and, perfect, etc., etc. And they just want position and motion. And it doesn't work. But there's other places you go and they're not giving you any specifics. Everything is an attitude. And where are you supposed to ever have a coordinate? Where do you build from when everything is so general? So the idea in new school singing is you prepare ahead of time to do something called switching. So if you're sitting there trying to get this larynx diving that I've told you about, first thing is, gotta make this easier to see, first thing is, why don't you send me an email at therealmropera@gmail.com. Maybe I'll say it like this.
I think I should say it like this. If you really want to get this done, you need to Mr. Opera.
No, I jest. So even if you got a great teacher like me, right, you can still get stuck if you're not ready to switch in the first place. So if your idea was that you'll find something like an attitude and it's going to fix you forever, you're eventually that's going to stop working. And there's things about switching from looking at a position to looking at a motion, for instance, that you have to learn about as you go. Pay attention. How often should I switch my focus? How long should I spend trying to get a position before I move on and do something else, like try to get a motion, or even just do something else completely, or think in terms of attitude? I don't know. But how long do you stay doing the same thing if it doesn't seem like it's getting any kind of result? So that's the idea here with actually, having these things freaking programmed into OBS so that I can go F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and it changes like that for you. So look at some questions I get. Oh, so there's not a lot of questions, I guess. I think we're good. I think I'm gonna leave it here today. Maybe yeah, I think let's leave this here, guys. I've got some stuff to watch from a viewer, Dove Enton, but I haven't heard from Dove, and his country went to war a couple days ago. So I think I'd like to hear from Dove first and make sure that he's okay before we go listen to the stuff that he wanted to listen to. I don't know what you guys think, but that seems totally reasonable to me. I'm going to do this real quick. Yeah. So that's enough for today, I think, guys. And because I want to go make some dinner for my lovely girlfriend and dog, who they deserve the finest. Which, you guys are not providing. I have to be honest. But yeah, it's not all bad. I don't know if you guys know, but I've been having kind of a rough season. I'll be open with you guys. I'll be open. I have a horizontal tear in my lateral meniscus in my right leg. So some of the shows that I'm currently in, I can do because they don't involve a lot of action on. Or they can be modified so that I can do all the stuff I need to do on stage. But then some other shows that I have are just too physical to be doing with the meniscus tear. So that's why you guys are seeing me so much. I have not all of my work canceled for this season, but a good portion of my work is canceled for this season because I simply can't do the actual staging without two working legs. And yeah, so that's that. So I'm doing a lot more teaching these days, and I guess I'll keep you guys posted when the surgery happens, etc. And I guess next time, music accounting, I will turn on the there's a feature that makes it so I have so it'll like automatically start when I hit stream on OBS. It's set up really stupid. So if I set up auto start, then it's like dangerous, because if I accidentally hit start streaming, it'll just start random stream. Yeah. And then the way it was now, like I started streaming and then I went to the page and I hit start stream, but then I clicked off of the tab, and if you click off of the tab too quickly, it'll actually not register that you started the stream. Even though it's ridiculous. Ridiculous, I tell you. So, yeah, sorry, Mr. Opera. Well, looks like we started halfway through on that channel.
Good night.
The straw.
It's just a straw, right?
It's not just any old straw. We've sized it very particularly, you guys.
So the SMBT Straw Pro comes with a minimum of 40 resistance configurations in one device.
And then we have 2 straws that are the exact same size, diameter, and length. And this is so that we have options.
After you've practiced the exercises for maybe 5 minutes,
you'll see here that the vocal cords aren't in sync with each other.
You have to put more work within the body to just get things going because the straw isn't providing you with enough.
it is very important that you let no air escape around the straw between your lips or through your nose.
But the thing is with that, it cuts off the nasal resonance part of singing, which is very important to singing.
It's almost as if you're trying to release it out through the straw to whatever's in front of you.
You will find when you go back to normal speech that your voice seems to be coming out of your eyes instead of your throat.
If you are splashing yourself, you're creating volcanoes, and that is not allowed.
A wise man once said, "There is a sucker born every minute."
No, 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 no. Oh, hell no.
So just grab a straw.
For those of you who talk several hours a day and your voice gets tired, here's a tip to keep you talking. Press your voice like this